So Israel has just knocked down a third building right here. If you want to see the gruesome scene, it's an apartment block. It's not a building, meaning a lot of people live here.
يعني مش شروط كنه
And there we go. Yeah, they're building. 65 people at this point are dead. 16 of those 65 are kids. So I guess that's a third are children. There are 6 Israelis that are killed, with one of them being a child. You know, if you are trying to forcibly take someone's property away from them, and this is, the theft of property that has taken place over and over and over again, where there would be these sham negotiations that would allow Israel to expropriate more land, with the United States basically covering their behavior by giving them billions of dollars, looking the other way in regards to them procuring nuclear weapons. I mean, it's astonishing. And you have a situation like this where the police are basically, they're about to take somebody's property away using these racist laws to do it. And the public, who has to deal with this kind of theft of property for God knows how long, has to deal with this oppressive society. In fact, there's a video, this. Where is it? Right here. I've been to Bethlehem. And, if you've ever been to Jerusalem, Jerusalem looks like just a little America. You would see burger joints in Jerusalem. Bethlehem, or some of those other areas, are dirt poor. And when I mean dirt poor, I mean dirt poor, where electricity is iffy. I mean, the centers, are impoverished. It is hard to get across the night and day variance from one to the other. And it breeds a certain level of contempt. For one, for land that is theirs, that is basically being stolen and expropriated, there is no law from the standpoint of the way it's basically used against them as a club per se. It's basically an open air ghetto, talking about West Bank and Gaza Strip. And this is constant police harassment, constant. It puts me in the mind, honestly, of the United States circa 1950s, 1940s, where this oppressive society, on the way that it dealt with the various people of the society, where you have these second-class citizens that is understood to be second-class citizens, just an openly racist system. And this is not to say that, if you're talking to Israeli, the person can't be, is not necessarily decent. It's just on that issue, they are horrendous. And it goes almost like across the board. When you're over there, it's astonishing. That breeds contempt. It breeds contempt from the people who are there, who are living through it, and it breeds contempt from the people who are there in the system that is actually enacting that particular system. It makes monsters out of both on some level. If you think of the South, what did it do to the people, for those people to be slave masters? And what did it do to the person who was a slave? And I'm not necessarily saying it's that stark. In fact, this one is on some level, I can't say worse, but on some level it is, because it reminds me more so of the Native Americans and the way that it tends to trend. This seems like people are being put into pens, It is not a system where people are being exploited for work. It's people being put into pens where it looks like it's getting to the point of trying to put people into reservations. It's almost as if Israel is modeling America and this settler colonial project that's taking place. They're taking land in a particular neighborhood. Now, if you're taking somebody's land, does that person have a right to defend themselves? Yay or no? Which is it? If the answer is yes, then they're not wrong for pushing back. If the answer is no, then it doesn't really matter. There's no spoon. Now, you can make a case that says, well, can you win that? Well, that's different. That's a different question. But do you have a right to rebel? Yes. And in this very specific case, whether you want to say this is foolhardy, that may be true. Whether you want to say it's senseless violence, it's senseless violence in the system to which they are living in constantly. It is an apartheid system. So yeah, I get that. I don't necessarily like the random senseless violence of a person being born and living in that particular apartheid system. No, I agree. From the standpoint of the response to that, how do you categorize that? Is that rational violence? Is that ethical violence on some level? I mean, think about what we're saying for the moment. This is your property. Somebody says, I'm going to take that property. And you says, you can't take that property. That's not right for you to take that property. And you say, there is no law that allows you to take this. Say, there is a law. Here's one right here. Our family owned this before the war. Now, if you are Palestinian, that doesn't apply to you. You can't come back and get your land. But Israelis can come up. Well, that's ours. And all deference will be given. And they would take that land from you. And honestly, in some situations, whether or not there's a law or not, there's an issue of force. You will lose that land. Where's the law? Here, I just made a law. This law says, get the fuck off this land now. That's what this law says. Or we will bash your head. And this is like, the world looks at this and just kind of stares at that. Just an eyesore. I mean, it's a colonial project in real time, in real fucking time. If we were back with the Native Americans, there was an episode of Star Trek where these guys were just sitting in a mountain and they were watching these pre-Vulcans go about living their lives, and they were just observing. And it was like, oh, look, they're learning how to use tools. It was that. If we could do that and just watch what it was like back then, it's that. It's that. It's Israel. It's what's taking place right there. Hey, this law says you need to get the fuck out. But we live here. Sorry. We can't do anything about that. The law is the law. The law is the law. It's given to us by God. So that's, it is a Jewish state after all. I mean, it's utterly astonishing. And so then when people push back and rebel, people are shocked by that. It's like, I can't believe people are fighting back under this situation. Now, the operative question on some level of whether or not the individuals can win is almost secondary to the point that you will get this type of pushback. You will get this level of pushback in the United States. I mean, we were talking about the riots and whatnot that were taking place in the 60s. This is worse. This is worse. Far, far worse. It's also apparently not isolated. I mean, they're making the point of saying the number of Palestinians that lived in Israel that were protesting was basically shocking the hell out of people because it was so many. And where's right here? All of these places, they're protesting. Let's be very clear. This is not a conflict. This is not two sides are meeting and they're having that's not a conflict. One side has nuclear weapons. The other side is living in places where barely has electricity. And they are knocking down buildings in places that barely have electricity. Meaning one side is extremely rich, living behind a wall with Iron Dome. The other side has nothing. And the other side that is extremely rich is using that wealth and weapons, billions given to us, to basically mow down civilian targets with airplanes. And the rest of the world calls that a conflict. That's a fucking massacre. That's not a conflict. That's something else. I get that rockets are being fired, but the rockets are being fired because you're trying to steal people's land from them. And it's a response until you basically stealing and expropriating more and more land. Ravenous. And the world just watches as you devour all of this different land. It's astonishing to me that the world just watches this. And the United States allows this. Not just allows it, openly and tacitly on some level permitted it. And just with these sham negotiations as if there was something that was being negotiated here when the United States just allowed more and more land to continue to be taken. How far this goes is unclear. And, up to this point, how many of these places that are pushing back at this point? And Israel is threatening basically to mow down even more buildings. Netanyahu put out a tweet. Where is it? Right here. Whoever shoots at us bleeds in his head. Congratulations to the IDF. This is not a conflict. One side is having their land stolen from them. The other side is stealing that land. The side that is having the land stolen from them is pushing back. And every so often pushes back in spurts and flare-ups. The spurts and flare-ups are often put down by the ultimate military and air power of the side that is gluttonous and is given all sorts of cash and resources by us and other countries. That's basically what's taking place. It's an air force that we assist knocking down apartment buildings. I don't know whatever they may tell you on television, but that is literally what is taking place. Now, they could say Hamas lives there. Okay. But Hamas are just basically people in a various community. Why do you think that a third of the people that have died so far are children? It's because these are in residential areas. They're just knocking down buildings. It's astonishing that they're pulling this off. And let me stop saying that. I'm saying that reflexively just because of what it is. You're taking an Air Force and you're flying that Air Force and looking at an apartment building and you're knocking it down. That Air Force is in a poor version of a country to which you've stolen, basically. And you do it over and over and over again. The reason you're doing that is because people are firing rockets into territory that you consider to be yours. The people are firing rockets in territory that you consider to be yours because you keep stealing their land. I think the primary part here is, this is not an issue of faith. Whatever this gets coded as, people have different versions of this in various countries. In the United States, it was Christianity with Martin Luther King, or Malcolm X with Islam. And in this very specific case, you have Islam. That religion's often coded in this type of language or whatever. The issue here is land. And it's not intractable. One side expropriates more land. This is another situation that they're stealing land. And the other side who's responding to that, and the United States gets cast as the bad guy in this kind of weird Orwellian way of looking at the world. I don't know what Joe Biden's commentary is going to be on this. And Ned Price has gave this weird response talking about Israel has a right to defend itself. And somebody says Palestinians have a right to defend themselves. Yay or nay? And what are you going to answer to that? How are you going to answer that? How are you going to say, yes, Israel have a complete right to defend themselves? Palestinians say, well, do I have a right to defend myself? If you say yes, then does that mean I have a right to defend my property also? Or is it, yes, you can defend yourself outside of your property over there? I mean, that's basically what's taking place. These guys are, one more thing. Democrats are calling, well, some of them basically, right here. The forced displacement of Palestinian families in Sheikh Jarrah is blatant human rights violation. I was proud to lead an effort with Representative Mark Pocan to call Secretary Blinken to exert diplomatic pressure on Israel to halt the evictions. We must defend human rights everywhere. That's laughable. That's laughable. We must defend human rights everywhere. Israel has been stealing land forever. Why now? Why now? Why now? How many people need to die? How many Palestinians need to be killed before this pressure gets exerted? Understand, Israel doesn't do this in a vacuum. It's not done in a vacuum. If the United States stopped giving Israel money, if the United States basically said, look, you need to work that out. We'd help you with that, but from here on out, yeah, you're not getting weapons from us, you're not getting money from us, you're not getting support from us, and you will get help insofar as you are working towards a particular peace process. Now, they can blow us off, yes, but they're blowing us off alone. That includes in the UN and the various votes that they typically get defense from. All of that stuff comes on the line. If the U.S. took a posture like that, would they be more likely to get some level of peace? Yes. Is the U.S. going to do that? No, they're not. That's the honest to God truth. And so if you knew that you could kill 2,000 Palestinians, 80% of which are going to be civilians, and maybe a third of that being kids, and the United States will still co-sign that, would you do it? Yes. If you would send a point, yes. How do I know that? They've done it before. I don't know about the kid number, but the other number is true, 80% of which were civilians. It's right here. So Gaza fired into Jerusalem, apparently. Am I saying that right? I think I inverted this map. But, oh God, that blinking light is... Where is it? Here's another interesting thing right here. Israel must be taught a lesson. Erdogan is having a conversation apparently with Vladimir Putin, and he makes the point of saying the world community should give Israel a strong deterrent and a lesson. Here's the other weird point. All of those countries came together in Abraham Accords. And in signing those things, basically sold out Palestine, almost like sidelined the issue entirely in order to make peace relations with Israel. Now, whether or not the communities in those particular countries were onto that or not is somewhat secondary to the fact that the leadership of it felt open enough to come out and do just that. Now, it's one thing for them to do this in the private, in the secret, where there's like, yes, there's a tacit agreement between us. We have a red phone, we can talk and everything else, but don't talk to me if we're in crowds. I talk to you. You don't talk to me. It's different to be open. And it's brazen on some level. So now, what does it mean when this happens? Meaning, what is the relationship like with all of those countries when you see apartment blocks being knocked down? They're just mowing down apartment buildings. And yes, I get they're saying Hamas is in this particular building and Hamas is in that building. And Israel they have been killing Hamas, as they would call it. But fact of the matter is, they're killing a third of kids. Yeah. So yeah, Gaza. All right, I'll leave it. I'm aggravated about this. I really am, because it's an injustice, like a persistent, overt fucking injustice that we put so much money into. We put billions of dollars into this particular colonial settler project. And they commit that in the blinding light of day at this point. A fascist regime for all intents and purposes. That's that country. Like, share, subscribe.